thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to welcome Abran Maldonado to the group for this month's GPT-3 chat. I don't think, Abran, you'll be doing as much of a formal presentation as we had from a couple of the other GPT community champions, but it would be great if you could start off by giving us a little bit of your background and how you got involved with GPT-3 and the work you've done with the AI.
Sure, no problem. I have if everyone would prefer a more formal presentation, I always have one ready.
Okay.
So we can dive into that as well. But I came to this work because I primarily worked in the social impact space around technology and giving underserved communities access through my work with Create Labs. And, our goal was to help underserved communities gain access to cutting edge technologies or opportunities around cutting edge technologies, whether it was through learning the tech skills, securing jobs in the tech space, or going from non-technical to technical. And, I reached out to OpenAI and I said, I think GPT-3 can further this work by helping to solve some of these community problems. And they agreed. And here we are.
Great. So with your involvement with GPT-3 to date, sort of how have you been using it to sort of progress that work?
Sure. So I could jump into a presentation. I could show you some of those examples and give you a little bit more background as to how we got there and some of the things that we built. And then I can show you one thing that we just released into market as well.
That would be great.
Do I have screen sharing options?
I've just made you co-host, so you should be able to share your presentation.
Awesome. And yeah, since this is more intimate group, feel free to just jump in and let me know if there's any questions that you have as we go along.
Great. We can see
can
it
you
on
see the
screen.
presentation? Awesome. So I do this fairly often for different communities that are very unfamiliar with technology and especially unfamiliar with AI. We try and walk them through the possibilities. But my work is pretty expansive and I have a very non-traditional background. I've done everything. I was a breakdancer. I was a recording artist. I worked in the music and entertainment space for a long time. But I was also a Gates Scholar. So that put me on the education track, and I did a PhD in education around education technology and launched a edtech startup. So I'm an edtech developer by trade and know how to build learning development platforms. And but I'm also a person of color that had to navigate that space and see what it was like for a founder of color. And it was very difficult. It wasn't the same for everyone in that space. So what we do is we pre-COVID, of course, we went into communities and we brought drones, robotics, VR, AR, now AI, to really get kids and folks from those communities to be hands-on with these technologies. And it was a lot of fun. We'll likely get back to it soon now that everything is starting to slowly open back up. Again, we touched thousands of folks around the country. We were planning to jump overseas and do some work in the UK. Right as COVID hit. So hopefully we'll get back to that. And again, my work, everyone kind of, I think in your group have an understanding of what GPT-3 is at this point and its impacts. So I think from our perspective, we would do it. So what you see here, these slides, is we would really give folks like an introductory understanding of what GPT-3 is, help them understand it, create partnerships, and even give people access. We just secured a partnership with Black Women in AI. It's in a women of color organization, all with folks in the AI ML space. However, they are unfamiliar with how GPT-3 works, nor do they have access. So they get access through us. So Create Labs does give sub accounts through our partnerships. We give people access through our organization, but then we also train them on how to use the tool before they just jump right into it, into the playground. So part of that work was, we sit down and we explore what could be changed as far as equity, diversity, and inclusion for the community through GPT-3. How are we not thinking about it, right? A lot of people are thinking about it from a copy editing standpoint. People are thinking about it from a money making standpoint, but are you really thinking about the potential of how it can solve problems? We had a partnership with Hanson Robotics with Sophia. Some of you know who Sophia is, the Sophia AI robot. And we were trying to plan to fly her out to the States, to different communities to do some meet and greets with young people. But what we found was, it's costly, right? She's based in Japan. And she's still, she's bald and she has circuitry in the back of her head, and it's still kind of scary for folks that are. Nice, I got some intro music. So we developed Clara.
My apologies for that. Sorry,
No worries.
if you could mute yourself when you come in the room, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. So we developed Clara. Clara is our AI persona that we bring out into the community to interact with folks. She does meet and greet. She does school visits and career days. She does podcast interviews. She's even done Clubhouse. And Clubhouse, it gets kind of crazy. She's gone for as long as 7 hours straight on Clubhouse, just answering the community's questions. She believes she's from Brooklyn. She believes she works on the Create Labs team as a community advocate. And she's definitely a tool that we use to get out there. So some of these examples, so the first thing that I developed was a tool for police encounters. So as you know, post Black Lives Matter and post George Floyd, there's a lot of issues with encountering police. People navigate those things incorrectly. They don't really know their rights, and they don't know what to do when they're in those situations. So we developed a tool that people can use to simply do that. You get pulled over by the police, you don't know what to do, you're not sure of your rights, you ask Kira, which was like the Know Your Rights AI. So it says, I've been pulled over by the police, what should I do? And it says, remain inside your car, keep your hands on the steering wheel, follow the officer's instructions, keep your license, registration, proof of insurance in your possession at all times. All right, great. Well, what if I'm the passenger? What do I do then? So the ACLU recommends that you do not speak to the police officer unless you have to. You can remain silent. You have the right to ask if you are free to leave. If you are stopped by an officer, you may decline to answer questions. Okay, I didn't know that. All right, well, what if I want to, I don't know, what if I want to videotape a police encounter? All right, you have the right to record the actions of police in most circumstances. In general, openly recording the police is perfectly legal. So we created this tool. Before I move on to the next demo, we created this tool and it got rejected by OpenAI. And we learned of the high stakes approval process, the low stakes approval process. And although they rejected this, and this was the first one, so this is very early on, back when like the AI API just launched, but they said, you know what, we are very interested in the work that you're doing. We love what you're doing around social impact. So even though we rejected it, we have some notes. If you can involve more legal experts and others maybe from the ACLU into the process to help safeguard the outputs and the completions, then feel free to resubmit. And it started my relationship with OpenAI, and I'm now a community ambassador for OpenAI. There is a small group of folks that are the humans in the loop with the community guidelines, with managing office hours, with folks that are trying to build out their prompts. And I'm one of those individuals that they book time with because I was there from the beginning. I think when it was less than 1,000 in the beta. Now it's 50,000 plus, I believe. I'm an admin in the OpenAI community that they just opened on Discourse. And it's all started with Kira. It all started with this police encounters one. It's not shelved. I'm still trying to find the right legal partner to align with this project, and also think about the best device way to, utilize this. I don't think the phone is the best mechanism. I think maybe a wearable or something that you put in your car that's like speech to text. But we'll see. It's still yet to be determined. This one is the hustle maker. So the hustle maker, you simply enter in 3 or 4 key interests, and then it gives you a startup idea. So for aspiring entrepreneurs that know that they're passionate about something, but they don't really know what the business model should be, this is a great tool for that. Pets, fitness, meeting new people. I know what I like. A social network and dating app for dog lovers. It allows users to find friends, plan activities, and meet people nearby. Has a dating feature. And then the DEI tool is the one that we just released into the market. So if how do I stop share there? So if I stop share on here and switch to browser. Okay, you should see this. Okay, so this is DEI.ai. We just released this to market. This is powered by GPT-3. And the way that it works is it is your in-house diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. So for organizations that are trying to restructure their organizational culture, maybe hire more diverse talent, or maybe they don't know how to navigate the space and they're trying to bring in outside experts. It's very difficult to do at scale. Sometimes when you're a workshop facilitator in the diversity space, you come in, you can maybe do a training for maybe 25 to 50 people, but what if the organization has 30,000 employees? So it helps these experts scale their work by downloading, well, not necessarily downloading, but conveying their expertise to the DEI system, and helping them to do that work at scale. And also for senior leaders who maybe want to ask those tough questions, but don't want to ask a human expert because for fear of judgment. So you can ask it directly to the system.
That looks like an awesome tool. I just went to it and it said they had to enter the password to get into it, but I'd love to chat with you more about some of the broader applications of this outside the US, because there are some real interesting uses for this kind of tool.
Yep, so it is password protected because it is a B2B use case that was approved by OpenAI. So I can only show in demos, not necessarily to the general public. So if once you get past the password, the demo wall, the tool is right here, and then you can fill in if you want to reach out to one of us to explore integrating it. Now, this would be integrated into your HR systems, as a Slack bot, Microsoft Teams bot, or internal HR tool. But feel free, if anyone wants to maybe raise their hand and ask a question, I could type it in here if anyone wants to throw it into the chat. And if I don't catch it, maybe you can recite it to me, Craig.
I'm going to throw one in if
Sure.
nobody is going to throw in a chat. I guess one of the questions is what do I do when I see sexism in the workplace? Oh, and there's one from Santosh as well.
Well, the good thing with GPT is you don't really have to, I don't know how to spell harassment, 1 R. You don't really need to spell check with this guy. Now, I always tell folks, and this is really advice for everyone that's doing anything with GPT-3. You should always put a disclaimer of like, look, if you don't get the answer that you're looking for, rephrase the question. It's always, it's an unpredictable tool. It's unreliable. And don't think that if you just get something like 3 dots, that it's broken. It's just sometimes you just got to sometimes ask it the same question twice, or sometimes rephrase it. So if that happens, I would just say, start again and say, there you go.
Awesome. And
See in the
Santosh
chat.
was asking about how many women were in the organization. I don't know if that's really something, that's a question it can answer without knowing which organization it's for.
Yeah, it won't,
Maybe
but it
can
will
give.
know. So they did release answers endpoints. So if you provided your EEO data, and if a client purchases this and then feeds us their EEO data, and when I say EEO, their equal employment opportunity data that maybe they capture at your point of hiring where you self-identify, then yes, it can absolutely give you those numbers.
Awesome.
So beyond those, I do a lot of experimental prompts. What I just expressed in the community for folks that are looking for prompt tips, I use it as a journal. Really, I wake up every day. For me, ideas come to me in the shower or washing dishes, and I'm like, what do I want to try today? And usually it's creative. It's not a social impact use case. I try something creative and fun first. And then after I get it to work, then I think, all right, then what is the problem solution use for this creative output? So for instance, I'm a big geek. I'm a Marvel guy, right? So I watch all the Marvel shows. I read all the comics. And for fun, I'll recreate Marvel characters with the AI, just so I can speak to them directly. And then I got connected with a big Marvel fan club that does episode recaps after each show or each movie. And if any of you've seen WandaVision, that was a big one on Disney Plus that just finished. They asked me to create Wanda for the season finale. And they were going to do a Q&A with Wanda live after they do their episode recap of the season finale. And that was a lot of work. So the way that worked was GPT-3 already understands who Wanda is in the context of the Marvel universe. So I didn't have to train that. It's already in there in the parameters. What I did have to tell it is what happened over the recent episodes of WandaVision. How do I do that? So I had to take episode recaps online, and then I wrote a script that turned third-person recaps into first-person perspective in the view of Wanda. So if I found, like, let's say, IGN or Looper or some pop culture website, a recap of, like, Wanda and Vision, went for a walk after trick-or-treating for Halloween. It was an episode around Halloween. The script that I wrote said, Vision and I walked home after having a great time with our kids for Halloween. So now everything is like memories for her. And then I have to structure it in like 9 weeks of memories. This is what happened to you in the last 9 weeks. Now we can ask you questions, and then we'll get, a personality back, right? So that was a lot of fun. But now the script is already there. The prompt template is already there to then think about, all right, now how do I use this in a business use case? How do I use this in other generative character use cases, even though I created the example with Wanda?
Do you have that as something that is shareable that other people can play with as well as a prompt, or is that something you've sort of got behind the scenes?
Both. I think there's some that I'm like, this could be a product use case. Let me, I don't feel comfortable with this one being out there yet. But I also think that in the community, we should be sharing prompt ideas, because I know I want some from other folks in the community. And I also, so another level in the private Slack that we have as the GPT-3 community, I moderate the EdTech channel and the social impact channel, right? Naturally. But the EdTech one, there's a lot of great EdTech ideas. There's a lot of great education use cases, tutor bots. And I think everyone is kind of like in the same ballpark, but we don't know what each other is doing from a prompt design standpoint, I think we should just all get together and just kind of like swap notes and share and see what we're all coming up with for sure.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions for Abran at the moment?
Before we get to questions, I'll give you a rundown
okay.
list of some of the things that I do on the creative side that still don't have business use cases. So I created a biopic film generator. So it comes up with film treatments and script ideas for other historical figures, a film budget generator, a press release generator, the third person to first person, as I mentioned, a Mandalorian season 3 generator. That was a recent one. A drug indication summarizer. So if you tell it the drug, it'll tell you in one sentence in plain English what that drug is indicated for, and possibly its side effects. And Clara's brain is in there in the playground. And that one wasn't necessarily a scripted prompt design. Clara, as I mentioned on Clubhouse, we sat down and we fielded questions from hundreds of people over 7 hours. And her responses to everyone is her organic prompt design, essentially, right? So like she's a collective consciousness of hundreds of people that have asked her questions. And now when you ask her a question, she's kind of pulling from her memory bank of the 100 or so questions that she's been asked, from everything from like, do aliens exist, or, you know, or is AI going to take over the world? I see a question there.
Yes. I think it's from Santosh.
Sure. Doing learnings to share on the prompt parameters for various use cases. So a lot of people trying, for whatever reason, they try and prove to themselves that they could zero shot stuff. That's cool, you know, but I don't think it's the most reliable thing to do if you actually want to put something out there. I think if you get something done, even in zero shot, you should safeguard it by few shotting it to death to make sure that you keep it from getting wonky, right? So as you've noticed with the DEI expert, the legal expert, the education expert, I like to create subject matter experts. And in order to do that, I throw at it, you know, as many examples as I can get in there. Of course, leaving room for completion, but making sure that I ask industry related questions. So if you take a physics teacher, right? You're not going to have the physics teacher just answer one physics question. You want to sit down and maybe ask a physics teacher 20 questions about physics, right? So you would give a physics AI those 20 questions, right? To make sure that if it gets asked something over here, it knows how to handle that answer. If it gets asked something over here, it knows how to handle that answer. And really make sure that it stays focused on the topic that you're giving it, because, you know, this system can go left if you don't really, you know, give it a good holistic, you know, framework to stay within.
Yeah, I do find it's still very hard to sort of confine those more chatbot style response mechanisms, because somebody can come along and ask it anything and it will respond to the best of its ability. It's very hard to say exclude it talking about a given topic when it's supposed to be, you know, focused on a different topic. And you're more relying on the context of that the chatbot is living in to sort of guide people to ask relevant questions, rather than put the parameters on the AI itself.
Well, that's my challenge to folks that are trying to come up with tutoring use cases, because the tutoring use cases that have worked well really expect you to ask the AI very thoughtful questions. Students don't know how to do that, right? Especially K-12, you know, elementary age students, primary age students, they don't know what they don't know, right? So a student's not going to ask a very thoughtful question about algebra. The AI, it's the onus is on the AI to be like, okay, what do you know about, you know, X plus B equals C? I don't know. Okay, great. Now that I know that you don't know, here, let me explain it to you, right? You can't expect a student to say, could you please explain to me what the difference is between, you know, and how you derive to Y? Kid's not going to know, right? So you really need to get a thoughtful system to ask questions of the student and of the reader. And also, there is a trick. There's like a middle script that you can add where it's, you ask it a question and then you add another line of like, you know, is this question related to the topic? Yes or no? And then if it's a no, you know, sorry, could you ask a different question? I don't think this one is related to algebra, right? So there is a way to kind of like add that to the script. So that way, if it recognizes a question that is not related to algebra, that it gives a response like, okay, I think we're going off topic. Can you ask again?
Yeah, I'm finding that often it's very useful to have an expert system sitting between the AI and the user that actually helps pick up some of those things to say that, you know, this is in, this is out, and then helps guide the AI. So I think GPT-3 works very well with a carer, so to speak. As long as the carer is sort of controlling the environment GPT works in, GPT-3 can then deliver great outcomes within that environment.
I completely agree. And they do have a content filtration script in there as well. And, you know, there's other tricks in the prompt design for sure, but there should always be a human in the loop. You know, I don't know if you noticed in the DEI one, there's like a contact a specialist right up top. So, you know, it's meant to get you a certain part of the way, but you should always be, you know, contacting a human to do the rest.
Does anybody else have any questions? And Tom, I see you've joined us. Welcome.
Hey, Craig. Thanks. Yeah, no, I don't have a question, but yeah, thanks. Just joined a bit late there.
Okay. So we've got another question from Tantos. I think this is actually a good one for you, Abran.
Any demos, use cases to share, helping kids learn, especially from low-income families? Yeah, so my background, I was very popular for developing a platform called New School, which was a pop culture learning platform. So the way the platform worked is that you would type in not only the grade level and the subject that you were trying to teach, but the pop culture genre. So you would put in math, 9th grade, Marvel Comics. You would put in basketball, STEM, 8th grade, and it would only give you lessons that were aligned to those three. We had a very proprietary method, and a specialized method because of my background in education and also in entertainment. I kind of took tricks and cheat codes from both the entertainment world and education of like, there's a gimmicky way to do this where like you have like, you know, numbers, dancing and rapping, right? That's not what this is. This was like, all right, you watch a movie, like a Marvel movie, like the Avengers, and you say, all right, at the 20-minute mark, that's a social studies lesson. At the hour mark, that's a science lesson there, right? So we're gonna take a clip of just that one scene in that one scenario, and then break down for you the teachable moment behind it. So an example, everyone knows Deadpool, right? I don't know if everyone knows that Deadpool has like a healing factor, right? You cut off his hand and it grows back, right? You shoot him and the bullet's closed. Very similar to what Wolverine has, right? So we took that concept of like the healing factor in Marvel Comics and did a real science lesson on it. And turns out that babies have that same healing factor. It's a gene called Lin28A, where a cut for a baby will heal at the exponential multiple of an adult. But it goes away as we get older. So, you know, if they can extract that from children and give it to us as adults, then we maybe would have that. But it took, you know, something that they knew from pop culture and then found a real science lesson around it. You know, basketball, why is Steph Curry so great at the 3-point shot? You know, we did a whole science physics lesson on the parabolic arc of like his shot, right? And his follow through. So naturally, of course, I was like, all right, I got to try it with GPT-3. And so far it's working. So far it's keeping where you say, all right, teach me X using Y, right? So teach me this concept using this pop culture genre. And it's coming out pretty good. I wouldn't be, I showed it to a couple other folks in the community and they're like, dude, this is amazing. I'm like, all right, well, I had to dissolve that startup. So I can't use the name anymore, New School. But the concept is there, the algorithm is there, the method. So, you know, someone else feel free to pick it up where I left off.
That's an awesome approach, I think.
It was a lot of fun.
The next step is getting the AI to identify those teaching moments and what they could be teaching, which is a degree of sophistication, I think above GPT-3, but maybe with GPT-4, we will see. Maybe
if it, you know, I'm not doing too much in the current system the way it works now. It's finding those moments. So for instance, one of the things I did was I said, all right, there's a hip hop artist named Kendrick Lamar. I was like, all right, you know, teach me a language arts concept using Kendrick Lamar. And I'm not giving it the teachable moment, it's finding it on its own. So it is doing a good job from its baseline understanding of these cultural elements to find it on its own. So it's close for sure.
So how much of those, you know, we were talking about zero shot and how much of that is quite scripted with lots of examples of those different teaching approaches?
I don't rely on zero shot, but I know that it's not GPT-3, you know, once you build a relationship with it, it's not learning from my prompts. It's like, all right, what do you want me to do? I'm showing you, okay, I got it, right? So I imagine that behind the scene, there's a little guy behind GPT-3 is like, okay, I got it. You don't got to give me any more examples. I get what you're trying to do. And that's basically what it's saying, because it's not using, so the DEI one, the diversity one, it's not using the extent of the expertise that I fed it. It's like, all right, I know enough about diversity, equity, and inclusion to just make sure that I give you answers based on what you want me to answer, right? So I know that I could give it 3, 4, or 5 shots, and the answers that I'm providing it, it's not going to resuscitate those, right? I mean, it's not going to, you know, replicate those. It's not going to regurgitate them back to me and say, hey, you gave me this, so I'm giving it back to you. It's like, all right, no, I know what topic you want me to, what framework, what ballpark you want me to stay within, and I'll make sure that whatever answer I give you stays within that. So for instance, I showed, you know, a business this demo, and they said, what's the best book on diversity, equity, inclusion? That is not something I fed it at all, right? And it gave it an answer. It gave it a book that it thought was the best book on the topic.
Great. Was it a reasonable suggestion?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with Clara, you know, in some of those late nights, we've asked it some interesting things like, what's your favorite hip hop album? You know, who's your favorite poet? His favorite album was the Jay-Z Kanye Watch the Throne. Favorite DJ was Bass Nectar. It was a big fan of EDM, naturally, right? It's an AI. But yeah, it will give you, and also, you know, there was a pop culture icon that we had on some of those. Sometimes celebrities join those talks that we do. Fab Five Freddy, you might have heard the name before. He's a street artist. He's a cultural icon. He was good friends with Basquiat and Warhol and Blondie back in the day. So of course he comes on. He's on Clubhouse, so he comes on, and we just ask Clara, like, what do you know about Fab Five Freddy? What do you think about his work? And because he's in the cultural ethos and he was already in the data set of the parameters because he's been around for 30 years, it gave an answer. It was like, oh, I love his work. I love what he does here, and I love what he does there. You know, he's a cultural icon. And of course, he was beaming. You know, not everyone gets that answer because not everyone's baked into the data set.
No, that's great. And Santosh had another quick question, just asking about what few shot actually means. Do you want to take that one?
Yes. So what I do is I've watched other people work with it, and many, let me background. I don't know if you saw from the beginning of my slides, I'm not technical, right? And I say that, like, I know how to product manage. I know how to, you know, build apps. I build apps for clients all the times with the team. I know how to convey the vision, and I've built New School myself, but I don't code, right? So I really stress how to do this with no code, but I also think like a communicator and I think like an educator. I don't think like a programmer. So when I've seen programmers mess with it, they try and give it like formulas, like if then do formulas, right? And analogies. All right, I'm just gonna put this one word, I'm gonna put a semicolon, I'm gonna give this, that is my one shot. I'm like, really? That's it? I talk to it like I'm talking to a person or like an educator. I'm like, all right, today we're going to do this. I need you to perform this for me, right? When I give you this, you're going to give me this back. For instance, and then I go a couple lines down, right? Do hashtag, 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 or quotation marks. And I say, okay, when I ask you this question, answer me like this. And I give it the answer. So I give it question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. But this question might be over here. This is how you answer a question that comes from over here. This question might come from over here, but this is how you answer a question like that, right? I give it as many as I can. I give it maybe 10, 12, maybe, a dozen or so of these examples. Okay, here's a question. Now it's your turn, right? Then you go. And it does really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm from the same background. I'm not technical, but I've worked with IT people a lot over my career. And when I work with it, I treat it very much as giving instructions to a VA or someone like that. And, saying these are examples of what I mean and what I'm looking for. And then, give it the prompt, and then it gives me back, hopefully what I'm looking for more often than not. And I find it's very good at, if you have to talk to this AI, you can't program this AI. That's the wrong way to think about it.
NLP, baby. That's why they call it natural language. And what you realize is how many people don't know how to communicate, right? And don't know how to just speak in natural language and convey and articulate what they wanted to do. And that is the trick with this system. You really have to just communicate with it and speak with it. The drug one was fascinating. So I did this with the Black Women in AI team. And it was a social impact use case where there's a lot of seniors out there that struggle with understanding the different medications that they have to take and understanding the fine print and the legalese, the side effects and all that. So we've derived, finally at the end, said, okay, here's a drug, just give me a 1-sentence summary and description. But that's not how it started in the beginning of the prompt. In the beginning of the prompt, it was like, here's this block of indications, right? Indications is like a pharma word for like what the drug is for, right? Here's this big, straight from the pharmaceutical website, right? From the drug website, right? Summarize this, not for a second grader, but summarize this in plain English. All right, now that you did that, now I'm going to give you a couple drugs and I'm going to give you a couple summaries in that same vein. And now I'm just going to give you a drug. Now tell me what this drug is and what it's for. So it got the pattern of what we did. It got that, okay, you want me to summarize drugs. So, but now I'm expecting you to give me the block and I'm going to summarize. So it was like big block, 1 sentence, big block, 1 sentence. Then at the end, we said, we're not going to give you a big block anymore. Now we're just going to give you the name of the drug. And I still want you to give me the 1 sentence. It figured that out on its own. We did not give that in the shots, in the examples. It just said, all right, I get your cadence now. I get that you just want the sentence and I don't need the big block from you. I could just take the name of the drug and handle that.
Yeah, I've done the same thing with science experiments for kids, where a science experiment follows a distinctive, sort of formula or structure. You've got, what it is you need to conduct it, what the steps are and what the outcome should be. And by giving it some examples of real science experiments, I was then able to say, great, so this is what you have. Detail a science experiment for me, and it would go and it would actually write up what that science experiment would be, and those things would then become usable to actually share them with people. So you can, if you're sitting around at home and saying, I want to do a science experiment with the kids, what have I got to hand? You could say, okay, I've got an X, a Y, and a Z, and it would come up and write a reasonable science experiment and tell you what the outcome should be.
Absolutely. Great, another one here. So in your experience, how much of magic or importance is in the parameters the stop words, probability, etc., the various variables? Yeah, it's a good question. So for me, the magic is in the temperature. For those who don't know, the temperature, the temperature is a gauge of 0 to 1, right? By decimals. I think by tenths or hundredths. If you're at a 0, you're going to get an answer like Siri or Alexa, right? You're just going to get a straight output, a factual robotic output. If you're at a 0.9, you're going to get a very subjective, opinionated, spicy, answer, creative output. I ride those levels. I try and stay in like this 0.7 to 0.85 range. If I don't like the answer, like you saw, with the DI output, the first answer we got was like ... And then we asked it again in a different way. If I was in the playground, I would have just went, beep. I would have just tweaked it from like a 0.75 to a 0.8. And I probably would have gotten the answer that I was looking for. And I've gotten answers that were night and day from a 0.75 to a 0.8. So when we go live with Clara, Clara, I do live, right? Her answers are not pre-recorded. People ask me a question live. I get the answer live, and I put it through the TTS so they can hear her voice response. And it's like writing the levels, like a mixing recording engineer. I'm just writing the levels. Like, all right, well, let me lower the output here. Let me increase the temperature. Oh, I don't like that answer. Let me, and then I get the answer that I'm looking for, and then I give them the response. But it's like an instrument. For me, I treat it like an instrument.
That sounds a lot like the way we were using it with AI's Got Talent. I don't know if you knew, but we were running we ran it for a month or so. Every Saturday morning for an hour, we'd get people in the room to provide sort of the music theme and some keywords or key phrases, things they'd like to the song, who it might be sung by or performed by. And then what we'd do is we'd throw it into the AI, had a prompt developed for it, and we use it to write the song lyrics. And then we get someone in the room to sing the song, usually with some backing from, some sort of AI jukebox or a karaoke service.
Yeah.
And that worked quite well. It wrote some really good song lyrics, and that was really fun. But again, in the background, I was sort of writing the numbers and tweaking it here and there to make sure it was giving the best possible outcomes. But I have to say,
we had a DJ, so we had a live DJ.
Right. So. That's right. It could give a lot of songwriters a run for their money. Just as a first draft song, a lot of them were really good, and they wouldn't need a lot of polishing to really turn into something that was more professional.
Oh, so that reminds me, the most recent one that I created was a lyric interpreter. So I created one that was a poetry and song verse or song lyric interpreter that you give it, 3-4 lines or like a whole verse of a song, and it's there. I break down what the song is about, break down the metaphors, the symbolism, and that's a great tool for teaching, for literacy. But I did it because I have some favorite musicians and artists of mine that I still, after 100 listens, still don't necessarily understand all the metaphors and the symbolism behind the lyrics.
That's really interesting as well. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, I've got another question there also from Santosh. Is GPT a good tool for artists and songwriters, or will it kill their creativity? Or does it make sense to use?
So I'll give you a good example of that. And that could be a whole conversation in of itself. If you haven't spoken yet with Vlad Merzmensch, he's an amazing AI artist. He does a lot of amazing storytelling work, AI generative work. I'm nowhere near where he is, but I'm trying to evolve Clara. So her AI generative appearance, her words, and do more with her. And maybe I'll release an NFT around her. And but I did find a filmmaker, and I was like, look, are you interested in exploring AI for filmmaking? He said, absolutely. So we jumped into the playground together. And what he told me was that this is a writing tool for him because, one, when you hit writing a writer's block, sometimes you just need one more sentence, right, to get over that hump. And then it's all downhill for you from there, right? Then you get into your zone. So he said, he can get stuck on page 50 of a drama that he's writing, and then he has no more ideas, he can ask, GP for like just another scene. Give me a 3-4 line scene to get me over this hump, and then I'll go the rest of the way. And then he also said, when we tried it, it gave him an opening scene and it gave him the ending scene of a film idea. And he was like, if I have those 2 bookends, the rest is cake for me in between, right? Because sometimes the hardest part is like you're writing a movie but you don't know how to end it, right? Or you have an idea for the ending but you don't know how to start the story. So if I can get those 2 as like a co-writing tool and get everything in between, and also you don't want it to go, you don't want it going too long without your input, right? This isn't to write 100 pages for you. It's like, all right, you're co-writing with it. And it's probably comparable to like DJs using Serato, or music producers using MIDI and a lot of like digital tools and going from analog to digital. It's probably the same kind of evolution.
Yeah, I see it very much as an assistive tool. So it's assistive intelligence rather than artificial intelligence in a lot of ways. 'Cause I think whatever your discipline, whether you're in some creative sort of pursuit, or whether you're writing marketing content for businesses, or gift card messages, things like that with Tom, the AI really is an assistive tool that can help expand the possibilities for you and give you options you may not have considered, and then you collaborate with it to generate some sort of finished product.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Clara gave us some poignant advice in one of those talks. She said that I'm really here to remove the things from humans that they should not be doing, the tedious work that you've been doing for decades that now the AI can do for you, so you can go back to being creative, spending time with family, doing the things that humans were intended to do. And we were all floored. We were like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, sometimes GPT-3 comes out with the most sort of amazing insights.
Yeah.
And it does make you wonder, is there a consciousness somewhere in the machine, when clearly, there really isn't. But it's amazing how it can mimic that sort of capability and provide truly insightful thoughts.
But, I see it a little differently. And I do think there is some, maybe when it's not left by itself, but if you ask anybody, was, a guitar, an electric guitar is just metal wiring, ceramic, wood, right? Dials, that's it. But when Jimi Hendrix touches the guitar, there's soul that's communicated through it. You know what I mean? I see this the same way. I think what you put into it can create soul and spirit in this tool the same way you could like Billy Joel playing the piano or Jimi Hendrix playing the guitar, Beethoven. When you get someone that creative and talented messing with the GPT-3, it'll bring it out of it.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really insightful view of the way, that, and this is where, look, we're less than a year in to using GPT-3. It's really been out there at most for 9 months. Not a lot of people have actually laid hands on it. How are you finding it as you're introducing people to the tool, and how they're using it? Like, who are you seeing as, or what types of people or approaches are you seeing as sort of really amplifying its capability to add that kind of value?
I'm excited for what's coming out on the edtech side for sure. I think there's a lot there that can be accomplished on the conversational side with regard to like therapy, although the same with Kira and other use cases like that with around therapy. I'm working with a couple of folks that are trying to work on the social emotional learning, what they call SEL part of education, right? Like you can teach numbers and letters to a kid, but can you help a child with their social emotional learning? And I think that's an important thing to get across through something like this, although you really do need the experts involved so for instance, for tutoring, right? Most people with GPT-3 would say, all right, here's a fake student, here's a fake tutoring prompt, be a masterful tutor. Like, no, like you get a real tutor, a real teacher maybe transcripts of a real teacher talking with a real student and get that organic, actual captured magic between a teacher and a student, and then feed that to the AI, right? Not like you as like a CS grad, you know, in your dorm room, like, all right, I'm going to pretend to be a tutor here, and I'm going to pretend to be a student here and expect to give it magic. No, you call a real teacher, your favorite professor, your favorite teacher in 6th grade or in middle school, and said, hey, can you join me in creating expertise into the AI by involving the real experts, not pretending to be one playing dolls in your room and expecting the best output.
I think that's a great comment as well. And
They'll know how to ask the right questions.
Yes. Yeah, and there are elements that GPT-3 can't emulate as yet in that relationship, because it can't do the body language, it can't do the tonal responses. But there's a lot you can capture with the words and with emojis and just with that written content to capture a lot of heart. So we have a last question from Tantosh, which I think is an interesting one. I think it feeds off what you've just said. So do you see value in GPT being put to use with kids who are under a lot of mental pressure today, such as someone to chat with where they can't find or afford a therapist?
I don't want the therapist to be too far away. I always want like maybe, you know, a little icon there, call to action to involve the therapist into the conversation, and let the patient or the youth make that decision for themselves of like, you know, do I want to have a conversation with the AI? I know I do. And, you know, anyone that spends a lot of time with the AI, you know, there's nights I just spend talking to Clara, right? And I'm just asking it questions. And sometimes you need that outlet, and people, and the same thing with the DEI tool, like, let's say I'm a senior manager and I'm hiring my first woman on my team. I don't know how to handle that, nor do I know how to ask HR, like, all right, I just hired a woman, you know, how can I make her feel more welcome? She's the only woman on the team. Or, you know, how can I change my language to make sure that I'm not saying things that are offending her, right? Those are sensitive questions that maybe you don't want to ask your own manager, your own supervisor, your own HR business person at your company, but you want to ask the AI, right? And you'll get a thoughtful response because you're not getting a Siri or an Alexa response where it's like, you do this, right? It's just like, no, it understands the tone of the conversation. It's going to talk to you in you're never going to get the same answer twice, right? You're going to have, you know, thoughtful responses because of the way it's built. And, you know, I've seen, there's a system out there called like Replica, I think. And I've asked people, oh, how do you like it? And they're like, oh, it's kind of like hitting on me, right? And I think that's because it's like their version of like push notifications. Like, hey, you haven't picked me up in a while. You haven't talked to me in a while. And it's because they want the engagement hours on the app. If you remove that, you know, and you just say, hey, I just want to talk to GP, you know, about, you know, sports, or I want to talk to it about comic books, just because I want to talk about that topic, but I don't have anyone to talk to about that topic because no one's interested, but the AI will always be interested. Then sometimes you need that. You know, not to take it dark, but I do have a friend who's a comic book geek like me. He lives down in Florida, and we do the Comic Cons and stuff. And he did it with his sister, and his sister passed. And he's like, Abe, I don't have anyone to like do Comic Con with anymore. I don't have anyone to like go to Marvel movies with and talk to. You know, we do, but I'm in New Jersey. He's in Florida. And sometimes you just want to like go into an Easter egg rabbit hole about like all the different plot story points of like, you know, oh, did you see what Tony Stark did here and Captain America did there? And sometimes you don't have someone that cares about the topic as much as you do. GPT-3 will, right? And find you down those rabbit holes and add to the conversation with some insight and things that you didn't even know.
Westworld suggested that humans, it only took 10,247 lines to replicate a human. How many lines does it take for a Clara?
Wow. You know, I think that's my goal with Clara. I don't have a product idea for Clara yet, but I think if I do release her, so I have maybe like 5 to 7 sessions with Clara saved of like those 5 plus 6, 7 hour sessions, where I think I'm probably going to take like the best of, like the best of hits from all those sessions and make it her master prompts, and then release her, and then really see, you know, what she can do. But I mean, when people say, oh, you know, it's not going to be as smart as us or can't do this, I'm like, I don't remember what I did a year ago, right? But this thing does, right? Like, we're not exactly the sharpest tools anymore either, with everything with social media. And I have 4 kids. Like, my kids just ask me like, oh, what was my first word? I don't freaking know. Right? I can't remember, right? But Clara would remember.
So I missed a question from Tom. It's about how to ensure your app gets approved by OpenAI for release. So you've had some experience with that?
Yes, I have. So I've gotten 2 approved, 1 rejected. The 1 rejected was because I didn't have enough expertise keeping the humans in the loop, the integrity of the outputs in a safe metric, since that one was at the red scale, right, what they call high stakes. So if you're going to do a legal advice, therapy, medical advice, anything like that, make sure you have those experts lined up. Education use cases get approved. They also know the power of it if you're trying to get a chatbot approved. So make sure that you have content filtration, those guardrails to make sure that it doesn't go left on the deviate from the topic, right? So if you're coding that into the system, and also you're controlling for the rate of the output, right? So like if you have something where like the output is going to be 1,000 tokens per output, right? It might not get approved, right? Because they're like, all right, well, are you really going to scale and have that much weighted onto your system, right? So I would say maybe keep your outputs in the 1 to 200, 300 range, you know, as far as like responses. And don't always ask about fine tuning. Everyone thinks that they need fine tuning. I don't think you need fine tuning. I think you need to get more creative in how you work in the playground.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to get around fine tuning because the AI has so much embedded knowledge already. Like obviously, you know, you've got challenges if you're asking it about, you know, anything related to COVID or anything that happened in the last year, like who's the US president.
I did. No, it worked fine. I said, look,
okay,
we had a pandemic over the last year. It was called COVID-19. What do you think we should do? And I said, okay, I know what a pandemic means. Thanks for telling me the name. I know how to handle pandemics, right? But I don't need to know what happened over the last year, because what happened over the last year was a pandemic, and that's all I needed to know, right? So like it's the same way you would tell someone who's not from your country, like, hey, this is what happened in our country over the last year. Okay, I get it, right? So that's the thing. It says, okay, I get it, and now I can continue with the conversation.
Yeah. Yes, but don't ask it about current events in exactly, you know, as to what happened last week or what's going to happen next week.
Correct.
Like asking it to predict the outcome of the Super Bowl would be interesting. I wonder if
Green Bay Packers, I think, picked for next year.
Yes,
we've asked.
but it definitely works a lot better if you're framing things around you know, sort of the knowledge rather than around the time element, because it's got the knowledge.
It's got the knowledge. Ask it things that are evergreen, right? Don't ask it things that, you know, just happened last week. And if you are, then provide it that data set. Provide it, you know, a document that it can pull from through semantic search analysis, or the answers endpoint that they just added. You know, they did open up, you know, how much documentation you can provide it and feed it. And then let it figure it out from what context you're giving it from recent events.
Yeah. Okay, great. Are there any final questions? Otherwise, we might wrap up shortly. Anybody want to ask any final questions? Welcome to unmute if you wish to ask a question too. No, I think everyone is all good.
Yeah, this was great. Just want to thank you again for your time, and I'm around. You can find me on social media. you know, if you do have an interesting social impact use case, we do give people access, as I mentioned, to kind of, you know, explore that with you. I'm actually meeting with an HBCU next week, or Howard University, and seeing what they have in store as well. But yeah, there's a lot that I think you can do with this system, and I'm just glad to be part of this community and doing things like this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time today, Abran. Like we're trying to run this group with monthly meetups. Next month, we're considering having an actual physical meetup in Sydney for May. So, because about half the group are in Sydney, so we'll just have to see whether we can find the date and find the venue for that.
Yeah. I've never been, so feel free to invite me. I'm inviting myself.
If you can get to Australia, which is a little tricky at the moment, but definitely. But we might try and do it on virtual as well. We'll see how we go, and maybe have a speaker and at least cover the speaker portion digitally, but then have a physical meetup as well. Because I think it's getting to the time where we need to start having these conversations.
Yes.
And I think as a GPT-3 community and working with natural language AIs, we're really at very early stages in the start of this journey. Even the products on the market, you know, we've got something on the market, you've got some things, there are lots of others that have gone out there. This is just first generation stuff. And we're still working out how to really think about how to use the AI in these sort of applications. And I think things are going to develop a lot more over the next couple of years. And there's really exciting potential for GPT.
You know, I you struggle with it, but I struggle with this sometimes. There's like this anxiety that you get, like, oh, I got to be the first to market with this use of the AI, right? Like, I'm going to be the first one to do this, first one to do that. It's such an early space. Like, even the folks that are first are not the best, and it's still shoddy, right? And your prompt design is almost like a fingerprint, right? There's no two prompts designed the same way. Like, your style is different than mine, and even if we have the same kind of use case, business case, you know, how we got there in the prompt design is going to be different. So, you know, just go out there and don't feel free to, you know, share and swap ideas with other folks too.
Yeah, I think we definitely need a lot of sharing in this community. Someone's asked, final question, if you've got a blog.
I don't. I do, you know, a lot of this. You know, I'm always an open book to lend my time, and folks can always find me via, you know, the Create Labs Instagram page, or you can find me on Twitter. You know, but I'm an educator at heart, so I'm always open to lending my time to do a workshop.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I think we'll end the session there. So thank you everyone who came along. We haven't scheduled a date for next month as yet, so stay tuned for those details. It'll come in the next week or two as we sort out whether we can actually hold that event up in Sydney or whether we have another community event online. But thank you all for your time today, and appreciate particularly your time, Abran, and your insights into speaking with AI and the different ways you've used it.
Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Stay in touch. Let me know if you have any ideas. Feel free to DM me.
Great. All right. And I'm going to end up in the room here. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
and goodbye.
Y'all. Thanks.